Hello and welcome to the Movie Changeup podcast. As always, I am your host, Joe Fricke. If you couldn't tell by our preview, this is our James Bond month where we're celebrating James Bond for the entire month of September and at this point a little bit into October as well because we've got No Time to Die coming out on the first part of October. And I'm joined, as I have throughout this entire month, by Tristan Mayer, who neither of us before we started doing this month were really big Bond fans, I think. I had maybe seen one or two of the movies. He'd seen most of the Daniel Craig movies, and so we decided, hey, let's binge watch all of the Daniel Craig movies before we talk about it. Now, our other two main guests, or like usual guests, Johnny and Bobby, they had some stuff going on this week, so they haven't been able to join us. Tristan, we're doing our top 10. I don't think I said that. That is what this episode is. We're counting down our top 10 James Bond movies. What are your kind of overall thoughts? I know we've talked about Bond quite a bit this month, but what is your thoughts specifically as far as the top 10 goes?
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. I mean, I talked a lot about how surprised I am by Bond generally this month, and I had no experience, like you said, so coming into it. You have these ideas of what are the popular ones and what are the ones people are going to talk about and the ones that people are going to like. So some of those are in my top 10, some of the staples that I've heard about through the years, but I also have a couple surprises that I didn't hear anything about or some that I even heard were bad that ended up being in my top 10. So it'll be fun to talk about this list, especially with two people who are like kind of outsiders looking in on Bond and don't have like the nostalgia necessarily for all the iconography and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're watching, live and you're watching on YouTube later on, or if you're basically seeing us in video format, you might notice Tristan's camera going out throughout the podcast. He's having camera problems. However, hopefully his mic works throughout the entire time. And this is mostly a show you don't really need the visual component, but it's just a nice little added bonus. So, without further ado, Tristan, do you want to kick us off with our top 10?
Let's kick us off with the top 10. I mentioned right as we were going that I have a couple on here that might be surprising for people who are Bond fans and have some built-in ideas of what they like and don't like about the franchise. Because my number 10 here is Moonraker. I think it's kind of an embodiment of a lot of the really cheesy Bond Roger Moore style movies, and I really liked Roger Moore. I think he surprised me of all the Bonds that I heard so much about people not liking his movies. So I went into this movie in particular, but a lot of his movies with kind of like a uh, lower expectations than I might have otherwise. So I think that helped a bit. But yeah, this was definitely like if you want to just like we do drink alongs occasionally on this show, and I think that would be a fun one to drink along to because it's just like very ridiculous and it gives you all kinds of fun fan service, like bringing back an old henchman that people love from a previous movie. And Roger Moore is at like peak ridiculous in this one. So I think it's a one to throw at the bottom 10 here to kind of tribute that era of Bond and one that I liked a lot, but yeah, not one that's going to climb to the top of the list for me.
Yeah, Moonraker not on my list. Obviously, as I watched through all of these Bonds, I ranked all of them, and Moonraker ended up in my 14 spot. So obviously not in my top 10, but yeah, there were some really fun moments. I think part of why it wouldn't have cracked my top 10 is I feel like, especially the plot, it just doesn't exactly hold up anymore with the whole space aspect and everything. It was just too cheesy, but without being like that fun campiness level. The villain wasn't exactly campy. But Jaws coming back and his little turn was nice. Uh, and I like that aspect of it, but I think yeah, it just wasn't quite like the campy funness that I would have wanted for the cheesiness level that it had to put it in the top 10 like some of these other movies.
I definitely have some other cheesy ones in there, and it'll be fun to see what your 10 is.
All right, and so that brings us to my 10, I think, and that's a movie that I know is higher on your list, and because I know where it is on your list, and so that movie is Goldfinger.
Oh, yeah, definitely higher on my list, but I'm curious on why you have it as low as you do.
Yeah, it was directed by Guy Hamilton. Came out obviously 1964. I believe it was the third of the Sean Connery Bonds, and basically, you had a villain that. Minor spoiler alert for a movie that came out over 50 years ago, but essentially, Auric Goldfinger, his plot was he wanted to destabilize the U.S. economy by stealing all the gold in Fort Knox. And I feel part of why it's so low is it started off high on my list, but a lot of Bond fans consider it kind of the origin for a lot of the plot structure of the Bond movies that followed with the over-the-top villain and with the Bond girls coming in. It was kind of that, and with the Bond song and everything. It's kind of the original of the format, and I just feel like other movies eventually came in and did it better, and so that's why it comes in at the 10th spot. But it's a really fun movie, especially if you're if you're wanting to check out Bond. I almost say Casino Royale is, I think, where Tristan and I both started. I know it's where I started, and it's kind of like a Bond origin story.
Yeah, I
But I'd,
started there as well.
but I'd also say Goldfinger's another one to kind of start off with because it's kind of the origin of the story structure of Bond.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We'll talk more about Goldfinger later, but I want to reiterate that if you are new to Bond, especially new to the classic Bonds, or maybe you've seen Daniel Craig or one or two of those, you're not sure where to start, I think this is a perfect place. It has all of the notes and the hallmarks you like from a Bond movie, but it doesn't go over the top. It's not so ridiculous that you're like completely taken out of it. You're still invested, so it's a perfect balance for me of a
Yeah,
starting point.
yeah, definitely. All right, and so what is your number 9?
Speaking of starting points, my number 9 is the starting point. I have the movie that started it all on here, Doctor No. I think, uh, like you said, this is one that kind of is a testimony to being the originator, the one that kind of started things and kicked in a lot of the like the Bond girl and a lot of the iconic shots and lines and things like that are here. And I give it credit for that, and I think it still does stand up and is entertaining by itself. But I think it isn't necessarily the greatest. So I have it in the 10 spot here because I think all of these are solid, but I think that this for I'll give it props for establishing the formula and for having some really memorable lines and characters. And I think Doctor No as a villain is one that has stood throughout the franchise as kind of a fan favorite, one that people want to see again, despite only coming in this movie way, way back in the first movie. So I like it for that, and you really get to see Sean Connery like building the character a bit here. So you're seeing him kind of like come into the beginnings of the character. He's not necessarily like peak Bond right now, but he's you see him testing the waters and figuring out what the character is going to be. And I think it's fascinating for me to watch the beginnings of franchise, like the beginnings of characters. You'll go back and watch like the first Friday the 13th, and you're like, this is nothing like what I know Friday the 13th to be, but it kind of grows into that. And I think I like Doctor No because of that. It feels like you're watching like the seeds being planted for what Bond will grow into, and it's very surprising how already flourishing those plants are. But just from the first movie, you're getting good lines, getting a good villain, you're getting some nice suave Bond moments. So it's not completely amateur. So I think it's definitely worth seeing, and it's a good one to watch. But I definitely wouldn't say it was a starting point. Like I started there with this binge, but I don't necessarily think it would be a good starting point if you're new to the franchise because it's just older, hasn't necessarily aged well, and the format's been done in a more contemporary, accessible way. And a couple other movies we're going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is one of the ones. I think this was the second one I watched. I watched it immediately after Casino Royale, and I ranked it 21 out of 24, and I think it's the main one I want to go back and watch because I watched it so early. It's hard to, when I was comparing it to the others when I was doing my ranking, I want to see where it changed. However, outside of Jeffrey Wright in the Daniel Craig movies, it's my favorite portrayal of Felix Leiter. I feel like they really don't make the character as cool or as interesting as that character could be. And I did like the portrayal by Jack Lord, who people might know from the original Y50 as Felix Leiter, who's supposed to kind of be like the American version of James Bond. And I really don't feel like the the movies have really fully captured that. And I feel like Jack Lord was one of the better versions of that, and that's kind of the high point for me of that movie. And I did like Doctor No as a villain, and I thought Sean Connery was maybe not the best actor. That was my main problem, I think, with the movie, is it had a lot of that older style acting where no one is really reacting to each other. They're all just kind of saying the lines, and that's why the movie is so low on my list. Is I could never get into the story because the acting is just so wooden and so stiff, and no one's like they might as well have not been acting in the same room.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a bit more of the classic older ones in here than I think you do because I attach a bit more to that like old Hollywood kind of acting in the way like I like this franchise in the way that the old school of Hollywood, like this old noir kind of performances from these actors and actresses, kind of blends in with like new age filmmaking. I think it's really interesting in these first couple of movies. But yeah, I definitely think if you're not into that style of acting and that like really dated style of acting, that is certainly not contemporary. It could be hard to watch some of this stuff.
Yeah. All right, so I think that brings us to my number 9. And my number 9, you did the first Sean Connery one. And my number 9 is the last Sean Connery with You Only Live Twice from 1967, directed by Lewis Gilbert. And basically, it's the villain tries to pit the world superpowers against each other, by capturing space capsules. And James Bond is sent to Japan to kind of investigate what is going on. And there are some moments that are definitely a little problematic by today's standard, like you must become Japanese, which not great. I understand what they were going for, but this is one like what I was talking with Goldfinger, where there was like the cheesiness without the fun campiness. This had both. This had the cheesy, but it was also like fun and campy, and you had like these goofy characters that I think fit more of the tone, and which is why it's higher on my list. And I just it's a really fun movie. It's probably what I look for in a movie is not so much like a quality of the film. Like I could look at Godfather Part 2 and be like, this is a very well-made movie, but I watch it every couple years, but it's just not like this heavy rewatchable fun movie where you can just sit back, have a couple beers, you know. You Only Live Twice is more my speed of movie of what I go for.
Yeah, this barely did make the cut for me. I had it at number 12 on here on the list, but yeah, you mentioned it's just the perfect fun, and I think Bond, especially in these first few, like the Sean Connery era of Bond in particular, is very like all over the place in its tone, where they're still trying to figure out like, oh, is this a spy franchise? Is this a comedy franchise? Is this like an action franchise? What are we doing? And this one, I think, really kind of strikes the balance of being goofy, ridiculous, and also having good action, and also having some stakes that you at least kind of buy, and characters that you can root for. It's like a really solid one that barely did make the cut, but I definitely think it's one of the good Bonds.
Yeah, and I will also say a lot of people hate on the henchmen in this movie. The henchmen were amazing. They were like straight up out of a Coen Brothers movie. If the Coen Brothers were actually directing, I think one of them retired, and I can't remember which one. But they definitely seem something like straight out of No Country for Old Men or something like that, or um, my mind is just blanking here.
Blood
The Big
Simple is a good
Lebowski.
one.
The Big Lebowski. I would say they're very much something out of like The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, I think that's a good zany fit for those characters. One of the Coens still directing. They have a movie coming out this year from A24, I think. But yeah, it'd be
Macbeth
a
or
wild
whatever.
pick for wild pick for a Bond director. But we might see it come up in the next couple weeks here. Who knows?
All right.
That brings me to what we're at number 8 now. So we're going with another Roger Moore movie on the list. You're gonna see a couple of those on my list. I was a big Roger Moore, a sucker for Roger Moore, I guess, because this one is The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977, directed by Lewis Gilbert. I think you're really seeing Roger Moore, of course, was known for the camp and the ridiculousness and being really over the top, and I think that this one definitely is big and has a ridiculous plot of these submarines and these nuclear missiles, and it all feels very high stakes and kind of like larger than life in that way. But I do think the action works really well in here. I think it's probably some of his best action. And Roger Moore action is kind of up and down throughout his run. I like his run a lot, but I think as he got later on in the career, like he was using obvious stunt doubles and it was just like not viable. And I think that this one looked really good. And some of the action scenes in here are just really great and compelling action with a good mix of, like you said, the camp that we love from Bond, and introduce Jaws, who is one of the iconic characters of Bond, one of the iconic henchmen for sure. So I think for me, it's one of my favorites. Not my favorite Roger Moore. We'll have I think one more on my list from Roger Moore, but definitely in my favorites of Bond.
Yeah, it was one for me that I remember watching it in. It was one of those ones where as I was watching it was just hard to not just keep like looking at my phone or doing other things, because for whatever reason I just could not get into it as much as I tried. Like there were so many moments where I'd be like, oh, I missed something, and I would go back and rewind and like watch the scene over, and that just happened so many times in this movie. And for whatever reason I just couldn't get into it, and that's why on my list it's all the way down in the 18 spot. But it's one of
I
those
love
ones
that we
where
have such different lists.
it's one of those ones where I can understand why someone liked it, but it just maybe if I was in a different state of mind when I tried to watch it, I'd be more into it. But the time I did watch it, I just for whatever reason couldn't get into it. I did
Yeah,
like the thing at the beginning with the fake out of the Triple X, where you thought Triple X was going to be this guy that I'm 99% sure that was just like Roger Moore's stunt double, because the first 3 seconds of that scene I thought that was Roger Moore, and then I realized he's like 15 years younger, and then you find out Triple X is the girl, the Russian spy. But yeah, that was the best moment of the movie for me. It's like the 3 seconds I thought that was Roger Moore.
yeah. I mean, I love Roger Moore, so I think this is his best attempt at doing like an actual Bond movie
Yeah.
instead of like a camp movie. What do
All
you
right.
got for us, Joe?
All right. My number, what number am I on? Number 8 is License to Kill, directed by John Glenn, who did a lot of work for. He was like a second unit director, I think, or editor or something for some of the previous Bond movies, and he finally got a chance to direct one. And basically, this was kind of a take on a lot of the 80s action movies of the time. This was a year after Die Hard. And you actually have one half of Johnson and Johnson, the FBI agents from Die Hard, is in this movie as the main villain, and the other half of Johnson and Johnson, I believe, is a DEA agent in this movie. So, but yeah, basically Felix is killed, and uh, James Bond goes rogue, trying to figure out who killed Felix, and he gets his license to kill revoked, and it's just kind of a fun adventure action movie, and Timothy Dalton kind of cemented Timothy Dalton as one of my favorite Bonds. It's really fun movie, and it's one you might see our take on, because I believe in a couple weeks' time, Tristan and I will be pitching our reboots for this movie.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your reboot of that, knowing you have it so high, and I have it honestly a little bit higher than you because this one is my number 6 on the list. So I'll just talk about it now really quickly. We can just, uh, yeah, I think Timothy Dalton had a huge shoes to fill coming into this role, and this is him just at the peak of it. I think he only got a couple outings to try, and I think he pulled off that kind of darker take on Bond really well. You know, we give Daniel Craig credit now for being like the dark Bond, the Bond who goes off the grid and kind of shows like the real side of Bond. And when I hear that, I just think like Timothy Dalton did that first in License to Kill, and I think this is a great movie. You mentioned Bond going rogue and kind of losing his license to kill and having to do this off the kind of off the grid essentially, and that's something you see in like every Mission Impossible movie now. It's like, oh, Ethan Hunt's going off the grid. What's he gonna do? And like it felt like something in this because Bond, even when he disagreed with his orders, even when he like thought he was uh, being told to do something he shouldn't do, even when his emotions kind of got in the way, ultimately he came back onto the side of doing what he had to do and doing his job. And sometimes skirting the rules here and there, of course, because it was Bond. But ultimately, he knew like what his job to do was, and he followed those rules. And to see him completely kind of unhinged and not having to follow those rules anymore really worked well with Timothy Dalton's character. And I think I mentioned the villain Sanchez on our top list, our Mount Rushmore of villains, because I think he's a really cool foil to Bond. And Timothy Dalton has that darkness like unleashed. You're taking Bond, this character who's had this darkness inside him throughout the franchise. And now you're saying like, okay, let the dog out for this movie,
Yep.
and I think it works great. One that I definitely will be going back to is a rewatch. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely one I'll rewatch. It was basically any of these I'm down to rewatch for sure. But License to Kill was one of the more fun of the action movies in my style of action movies that I go for, kind of the late '80s, early '90s action movie. So
And you still get a lot of the Bond check marks. Like you have a really cool villain with like a
yeah,
cheesy base,
yeah,
but it's still within this more gritty kind of take on the character.
yeah. And this was one of my Felixes. It's the same Felix in, I believe, License to Kill and Living Daylights, which we will talk about soon. Um, and he wasn't the best, but I think the story around it in the opening in this movie that Christopher Nolan borrowed for the, or like it was inspired for the Dark Knight Rises, of the like plane takeover. So yeah, if you're a fan of Dark Knight Rises, I would say check out this movie. Not very similar, but the opening scenes are. And so I think that takes us to your 7. Strange. I don't
Yeah,
think we've had one commonality so far, maybe two.
yeah. I think this was our first one. Well, we have one that Goldfinger was on your list, but we haven't quite gotten to that one on mine yet. We will in a little while. But yeah, that brings me to my number 7, and it is we mentioned the first Bond, we mentioned the third Bond, so now let's go with the second Bond, From Russia with Love. I think this is a really strong spy thriller from Bond. I mentioned that at the beginning of Sean Connery's era, I really felt like they were experimenting with their genres and saying, "Oh, let's make it kind of goofy here. Let's make it a really serious one here." And this is them taking it more or less very seriously. Like there's some goofiness in Spectre and the kind of hamminess to the villains, but it's a much more serious movie than the previous one, and a much more serious movie than the one after it, and a lot of the ones after it. So, if I honestly think if you're a fan of like the Craig movies and you like the kind of gritty take on it, that's much more like a grounded story and about the spycraft and about like figuring out the mysteries going along, and not so much about the goofiness. This might be a good place to start if you want to get that kind of grounded entry point to Bond. But you have a really iconic henchman in red. You have the battle at the end on the train, which I think is really iconic. It gets attributed to a future movie, I think, that we're going to talk about in a second. But I think this kind of set the template, like how we mentioned that Goldfinger set the template for like the Bond formula and the big villains and the bases. I think this kind of set the template for what a Bond thriller can be. And once in a while, we do get these Bond spy thrillers thrown into the franchise, and this kind of set that up, and I think is one of the best ones. So yeah, for me, that's pretty high up on my list. I don't imagine it being that high on yours, but I'm curious on your thoughts, Joe.
No, this one only ended up being in the 18, or no, sorry, 17 spot on mine, because just a lot of those early Craig ones with the, like, not so great acting, I wasn't a fan of. But I did like the character of Red, played by Robert Shaw, who's probably most famous for the movie Jaws. Um, but I like the idea because his henchman character was a character like designed and trained to be able to take on James Bond, which I thought was kind of really cool and really interesting, and not something I expected from like the second James Bond movie. If someone told me, oh, there's eventually going to be a henchman who's, the idea behind the henchman is he was trained to fight James Bond, I would have thought, oh, that would have been, um, like 19, late 80s, like Roger Moore kind of villain.
Yeah, and I think turning it down and slowing it down a bit is something that you wouldn't expect from the second movie. Like out of that first movie, you'd think they'd be like, okay, let's up the ante, let's give them bigger action, let's give them bigger. And they, in a way, they do. Like the action is higher and more craft to it. It's obviously a bigger production, but it's not like a huge scope thing. There's not massive battles like you would think. They might go too big too quick. And I think this was a necessary movie to kind of break you up before you get to Goldfinger, where it's truly getting big and truly getting ridiculous.
All right. Yeah, definitely. All right,
And
so is
moving through
that
them quick, Joe. What are we at now? 7?
yeah, we are going through it quick, but we have plans to record something after this, so and we'll talk about that at the end. But we talked about the second Timothy Dalton movie, and now it's time to talk about his first one, The Living Daylights. Where basically you're dealing a lot with 1987, dealing a lot with the KGB, and we have one of the greatest scenes in all of Bond, and that's Bond sledding down a mountain in a cello case using the cello to steer, and that is amazing. This again is one of the more early, like realistic, gritty takes with Bond. After the Roger Moore ones kind of got goofy and weird, they decided to dial it back a little bit. But there were some of that fun, campy moments, like sledding down the mountain with the cello, and that's why I love the movie. It's.
Look, he slides down a mountain with a cello. How could it be bad?
Yeah.
And like you said, it kind of has the elements of the ridiculousness still left over while still having the grit and the what becomes like the the license to kill kind of tone, where it's kind of the hybrid of the dark and the camp. And for me, the tonal clash didn't necessarily work on this one. I think they have the idea of where they want to take the character here, but they don't necessarily go in that direction. They don't necessarily hold back and give him the fun either. So it just feels kind of confused on what it wants to be. And it's still a good one. I still put it like in the tier of good Bond movies. But for me, like License to Kill is doing the idea of this one so much better, and they really found the character in that movie. And this one for me is good, but I kind of made like an executive choice to move it down off the list because I wanted to get a room for another one on there. But yeah, this was a good one for me. I think it's a solid debut for him, but I think he's just done so much better in License to Kill that whenever I think about watching this one again, I'm just like, man, maybe I can just watch License to Kill instead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I understand that. As just for me, I prefer Living Daylights to License to Kill, so that's why it's just
Yeah,
slightly rated higher.
there's still great moments in this. Definitely not a bad one. I think Timothy Dalton's really underrated as Bond. He had these two movies, but I think both of them are some of the definitely good ones, if not the great ones of Bond. And I think people think like, oh, Connery versus Moore versus Craig versus Brosnan, and sometimes I think Timothy Dalton gets forgotten among the pack of people who made way more movies than he has. Now that we covered both of his movies, I kind of just wanted to talk about his portrayal in general. I think is a bit underrated.
Yeah, that's true. I wish he would have gotten more chances at Bond, but I really like Pierce Brosnan, who came in after him, so it's hard to be like, oh, I wouldn't have wanted less Pierce Brosnan, especially the earlier Pierce Brosnan movies, so it's kind of hard to take away one without the other.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think he has this little burst of uh, being in the role and is able to leave on top. Where I think almost all the other people who've had the character get by the end, you can tell like they're not really into it and they're kind of like losing interest. And he gets two bangers out the gate, then kind of gets to retire on the top. So that's a good move for him.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Sorry, my phone's acting weird.
I already gave my number six, which was we mentioned License to Kill. So we had
Oh, your sixth is
we
License to Kill.
My six was License to Kill. We mentioned it earlier. I mentioned it offhand as being on my list, but I forgot to mention it up front. Yeah, License to Kill is my number six. We talked
Okay.
about it already, but yeah, great grit to the character, and I love Timothy Dalton's take, and this is the peak of the take for me.
All right. Yeah. So, speaking of killing in movies directed by John Glenn, at my number six is A View to a Kill, the Roger Moore classic. I believe it's Roger Moore's last outing as Bond, and it's just a fun, campy, wild ride for 131 minutes. Came out in 1985, and you get some weird villains. Christopher Walken as Max Zorin. You get Tanya Roberts, who people might know from that '70s show, as Stacey Sutton, as one of the as the main Bond girl. You also have Grace Jones as Mayday. The movie's crazy. The movie's weird. The movie's wild, and every second of it is great.
Yeah, people talk about Bond being cheesy and ridiculous, and especially Roger Moore being cheesy and ridiculous. And people often cite Moonraker as like, oh, here's the one where it was the most ridiculous. And I don't think it's the most ridiculous there. I think A View to a Kill is great. And I mean, I might as well say it now. I have it one step above you at number five. Call us the
Alright.
weirdos in the group, but this is one of the ones I teased up front that I had a couple of ones that were really disliked among the fans of Bond and had generally low ratings, and that I just was really happy with. And Joe and I mentioned on our previous episode of Mount Rushmore that we were fans of this movie, particularly its opening. So I'm glad to see the whole movie made your list here, Joe, because it made mine one rank above yours. I think it a whole lot of fun. Yeah, Roger Moore is way too old for the role, but I honestly feel like at this point, like this movie is sort of leading into that in its own way. Like this feels self-aware from the front, like with the Beach Boys song playing over this like
Yeah,
ski
that was an
chase. It
amazing
feels
moment.
like they're just going for the fun and the cheese, and we've seen them try and do that in other movies where they're like, okay, we're going to go all out and make it super goofy, and then we get like some of the weaker entries in the whole franchise. And I think this managed to go all out bonkers, ridiculous, and still be just fun. And I had a great time with this one. And I'm not looking through nostalgia goggles. I've never seen it before. I don't have any like built up nostalgia for Roger Moore, but this one really hit for me. It's one that I've already rewatched it since watching it. So I think this will be one that I'll rewatch a couple of times. It's just pure fun. If you want to like drink and watch a Bond movie where everything ridiculous happens, and it's a perfect movie for that. And great theme. One of the best Bond themes, I think. Really fun, kind of unique. It doesn't sound like any of the other Bond theme songs, but it fits with the movie really well.
Yeah, that's true as well. It was just one of those ones that I don't know why. If you're a Bond fan and you grew up with it and you like the seriousness and all of that, you probably hate it and think the movie sucks. But I have no, like you said, I have no nostalgia. I don't care about the franchise like it's a thing I grew up with. I care about the franchise now because I watched the movies and I've seen the movies and I liked most of them. And A View to a Kill is one of the ones I liked more than most of the others.
Yeah, I was shocked to see it not just high on your list, but high on my list, and it's yeah, definitely one that I went into with preconceived notions of it being bad. So I think that helped. But I don't even know if you had that for yourself. Like I'd heard about this movie being one of the bad ones, so I had that idea going into it. So that I think helped me like it more than it might have if I was expecting it to be great or something. But yeah, I like this one a lot. I'd love to have a like a diehard lifetime Bond fan come on here and tell me why it's bad. But but like for me, going into Roger Moore and not having any of that built up idea of what Bond is in my nostalgic brain and being able to be like, okay, this is the kind of goofier, like overly romantic Bond, and this is kind of the darker Bond. And I was able to take each of the actors for who they are, so I think that also helped. But yeah, curious that we both had this so high on our list as the new people.
Yeah, this was not one that I really knew anything about. Like, I didn't really know anything about any of the Bond movies, and the only reason that I knew people might not like it is because it was ranked so low on our podcast host Johnny's list, because he, is a massive Bond fan, and I know he had it ranked more towards the bottom, and that was the only thing going into it where I thought people might not like it. But I also tried to avoid like memorizing his list. It was more like I'd watch a movie and I'd rank it, and then I'd see where it ranked on his list. And then when I had like three or four left, I kind of realized the three or four I had left were like the bottom three on his list, and that's when I started to get a little nervous. But I watched it and I'm like, this is great. This is fun. When he snowboarded down the mountain as the Beach Boys cover song played, I knew that this movie would be amazing. And it was.
Yeah, it was, and I mean Christopher Walken can be such a ridiculous character, and he really leans into that here. And you can tell, I love seeing movies like this where the actors you can tell are just having a really fun time with it, and Roger Moore is just having a blast do it, goofing around in this role. And of course, there's things he didn't like. He didn't get along necessarily with his co-star, and there's moments here and there that he didn't like. But I've heard great stories about him on set of the movie in general, being a great guy and having a lot of fun with the role. So you can tell Christopher Walken is also having really fun and just hamming it up. And I have a good time watching movies where everyone involved in the movie is like on the same level of what the movie is. Like everyone knew that this is a goofy one, and we're gonna have fun making it goofy.
Yeah.
And there's no like embarrassing person who's trying too hard, or no one who's like
This isn't
way above anybody else.
this isn't Bumblebee where everyone's making like a serious, well, as serious as a Transformers movie can be, but a movie where everyone's like taking it seriously and trying to do a good job, and John Cena still thinks he's in a Michael Bay Transformers movie, because that's my go-to now for any. I mean, I saw that movie for like 2 years ago, but that's always my go-to for like anytime someone doesn't realize what movie they're in, or they're in a different movie than somebody else. Is John Cena in Bumblebee,
It's a good example.
or John Cleese in no, whatever the second to last Pierce Brosnan one was.
Ah, yes, that one.
That's another one where John Cleese is not in the same movie as everybody else.
We're getting to our top five, Joe, and I kind of have a feeling we're going to have a good amount of crossover on this. Like I know, I can tell one that you have sitting out there that I can imagine is probably your number one, knowing your taste, knowing what you like. And
Curious.
there's one that I've punted up there that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah,
That's on my list.
I think our top 10 at the end isn't really going to be so much a combination of your list. It's going to be fighting for that one spot, and then it's just going to go ping ponging back and forth of just like, okay, we'll do your two, then my two, then your three, then my three. Like,
Yeah, I'm curious because I think we're going to have a couple crossovers here, but I'm thinking I might have one that you don't have in here, so we'll
Yeah.
see.
yeah. All right, so we've done your five, which is A View to a Kill. Crap, I messed this. Oh wait, no, we did this right. We did your five. Your five was A View
yeah,
to a
my
Kill.
five is Video Kill.
All right, so we did this right. Because I'm writing them down as we go, and I pre-wrote down all of mine. So really, I'm just writing down yours. And we have not done my five, right?
Nope.
All right, so my 5 is another. So I was wrong when I said "You Only Live Twice" is Sean Connery's final Bond, because that title is held by Diamonds Are Forever, I
My
think.
God, Joe. Are
And
you putting that at 5?
Diamonds Are Forever is my number 5, and this is the one I got. I got those two movies mixed up. I put them on my list before. Diamonds Are Forever is great, and this is the one with the two henchmen that should be straight out of
I was thinking, I was
uh,
like, I'm getting confused with these movies. I must be crossing my streams here of my Connerys.
yeah, I got them confused a little bit. I think. I don't know. It's been when you watch all of these movies back to back to back over the course of like 2.5 weeks, and most of them have the same actors through in them. They kind of all blend together. Um, but anyways, yeah, Diamonds Are Forever. Basically, there's basically the Death Star in the sky, and it's made out of diamonds, and they're using it to blow up parts of Earth. And Sean Connery's got to go stop them. And the movie's fun. The movie's cheesy. It's maybe the campiest movie I've ever seen in my life, and it was fun, entertaining. It takes place in Vegas, and James Bond deserves to take place in Vegas. And
Look, campy is a way to describe it. I don't know if I would say this is one of the ones that goes a little bit maybe too far into the camp direction for
you
me.
can never
A
go
little
too
bit.
far in the camp direction unless
Look,
that movie is called Batman 66.
coming from me, it's hard to say something is too campy, but like this is one of those ones where I'm not quite sure who knew what they were doing, and Sean Connery seems like he doesn't care about anything that's happening in the movie. He's more invested than he was in a couple of the other ones, but I think by this point I was really Sean Connery just felt uncomfortable in the role, and I don't think he necessarily felt like he wanted to be doing it. And
Of course, who wouldn't want to be James Bond? Sean Connery was made for this movie. I suffered through Doctor No and Goldfinger and all of those other craptastic movies for the greatness that is Diamonds Are Forever.
I mean, it's definitely campy. It feels like if Sean Connery made a Roger Moore movie, and it's that
Well, good on him.
perfect collage of ridiculousness. But I think it goes too much into the ridiculousness, and I think the fact that he's so old and it makes it a little harder to watch because where Roger Moore was kind of goofy and I feel like in a way leaned into the age differences and kind of made it kind of a joke. I don't know if I feel like Sean Connery really thought he was still looking good in this one, man. I feel it was almost
He
embarrassing at
was.
parts.
Women love a dad bod. You know, I'm all on Tinder. I'm all up on Tinder, and girls are always like, "Oh, I love dad bods." Sean Connery was out here rocking the dad bod before we even knew what a dad bod was.
Yeah, he got an all natural dad bod on there.
Exactly. He's a former Mr. Universe that's like, you know what? It's okay to have a little flab.
Look, I mean, might be one that I got to rewatch someday. Maybe I'll appreciate it more as I've learned
You
to
don't deserve
appreciate
to
the more
watch it.
ridiculous bonds. But look, Joe, I'm just trying to give your favorite Bond movie another chance because it's definitely not that high for me. For me, it's at a 19 out of 24. So not like the bottom, but pretty low down there.
All right. So we've done your 5. So I believe it is now your 4.
My number 4 is one that is really acclaimed. One that I caught bits and pieces of randomly on FX here and there throughout my childhood. Never quite sat down and watched, but I had in fact played the N64 game quite a lot. I'd killed many of my friends and been killed by many of my friends playing GoldenEye. So that is
I'm gonna
my
stop you right there and just say that is also my number 4. So
look at that. We landed right on each other there. I thought we'd
giggity.
have a crossover on this one. We're on top of you, Joe. We got GoldenEye, directed by Martin Campbell, who is going to return to the list, I have to imagine, in a second or two. But yeah, Pierce Brosnan. I always think the debuts of Bonds are fascinating to watch because they have all of this built-up baggage, and they have to debut the character. And there's a lot of pressure of like, okay, how do you perform? How do you open this movie? How do you establish this version of Bond, this era of Bond? And right from that jump at the beginning, they kind of established the Pierce Brosnan rule of cool of Bond. You know, it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to look cool when he does it. And I think Pierce Brosnan nails that in a lot of his movies. And even some of his weaker ones, he still kind of like looks like a badass in the suit, and he still pulls off some of the goofier stuff. I think Pierce Brosnan has this like sculpted Greek god look to him that really I think does well for this character. That I think feels like that, like almost like a too perfect to be real looking guy. uh, but this is definitely his best movie. Really great action, which also leads to the fact that his era is going to be very action oriented.
Yeah, and that
But
most
great action here, not just the opening sequence, but overall. But yeah, the opening sequence particularly stands test of time. But I think overall it's a good one.
Yeah, one of the things I did like about this movie is it was the first time we saw a former Double O agent become the villain, which is something we'll probably talk about again later in a
Mm-hmm.
different movie. But I really like that aspect. The only thing that would have made this movie better is if Pierce Brosnan had a movie before this where we saw him and Trevelyan work together. That was my only like main flaw, is that we never got to see them be friends. Then when they were fighting each other, you felt that impact more. But I thought Sean Bean would have been like a great like James Bond and a different, if like Pierce Brosnan wasn't their guy, like he didn't exist, and they were like, we cast Sean Bean. Like I think Sean Bean at this time period would have been a really fun and interesting James Bond. So I think having him as 006 is the former 006 Alex Trevelyan was great, and I think he was a really cool, fun villain, especially compared to um, Pierce Brosnan. And I think your villains kind of have to match your tone of your movie and what you're going for, and I think Trevelyan was perfect as the villain in GoldenEye.
Yeah, and I mentioned really liking Sanchez as kind of this dark foil to Bond, and that's, I mean, he's another double O agent. He's like what Bond could be if he went bad, you know, and yeah, it's very on the nose in that way, but I think it works. And yeah, Sean Bean is a great actor. I think he elevates movies, and you know, when you put well-known actors and actresses in these roles, it helps make it feel like a big thing.
Yep.
And I don't know if Sean Connery was a huge actor at this point, honestly, or not, but
I don't
watching
think so.
it
I
me
think he
me
was.
in 2021, he was big for me.
I don't think so. I think it was more just he was known as because he was Mr. Universe. So I don't think he was like had. If he had any roles, they were probably very small. The Broccolis don't really seem keen on casting like big stars. Like Daniel Craig wasn't really a big star when he was cast as Bond. That's why I don't think the next Bond is going to be an Idris Elba or anything that's like an A-list celebrity. Especially in an era where the movie star doesn't really sell the tickets anymore. It's the franchise. Why would you pay someone a bunch of money from the jump when they're not even really going to put butts in seats?
Yeah, I'm really curious because like Pierce Brosnan mentioned when he got fired from the role at the end of his run, like he was shocked because the movie's doing really well and making tons and tons of money. So he was like, "Oh, I thought we had a good thing going here,
Yeah.
you know, we were making money together. What happened?" And you mentioned that like the star isn't necessarily the draw anymore, and
Yeah. I mean, it still
they
was kind of almost in that era. Like 2005 was, I mean, 2005 ish was kind of the death, but I think the movies had just gotten so goofy they wanted to revert back and do a more Jason Bourne, and they realized that they really couldn't and have it still be in like that same universe with like Pierce Brosnan and everything. They're like, we
Yeah,
gotta
because they
just.
took a good break after Brosnan, so it was like
It
a
wasn't.
good amount of like a reconsidering.
It
It
was
wasn't
only.
long, but
It
it
was
was a
only.
few
It was
years,
4 years, I think,
more
because
than a couple. Because
it
a lot
was.
of these, it's like with a year later they're putting out a Bond movie, you know. So it was a pretty decent break. But yeah, you mentioned like
Cause,
a movie star, and I think he has movie star energy in GoldenEye, but also like throughout his whole run.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, I mentioned him being like this sculpted look to him. I think he just has a really classical movie star look in the way that, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just thinking like that look is kind of starting to slowly die out. Like we have Chris Evans and we have The
I
Rock and
would.
people who have like this as all star energy, but they're not like individually selling tickets really.
No. I I would say also too. I mean, it's hard to tell with Daniel Craig. I think he's probably going to have the best post Bond career, but I think Pierce Brosnan definitely had the not counting Craig because he's still in his Bond career, had the best post Bond career. Because Sean Connery was really only in like the last or the third Indiana Jones movie, and then he was like popped up here and there, but it was more of like a homage to his role as James Bond. Where Roger Moore didn't do anything, Timothy Dalton like barely pops up anywhere. Um, George
Yeah,
Lazenby basically did nothing after, and I think Pierce Brosnan. still acts like he's gonna be Doctor Fate in the Shazam 2, and I don't think it's really gonna be like, it's not an homage to him being Bond. It's just like, oh, you're a good actor and you fit what we want to do. Like, we're just gonna, we want you.
Yeah, and he has a good range too. Like he doesn't just do action movies. He's also with Mamma Mia. Like he has this romantic, like hot guy kind of charisma. Even still at his age, he looks really good. And yeah, definitely has
Yeah.
had the best post Bond career, especially Cinderella on Amazon Prime. It's a future Oscar winner there.
Oh, is he in that?
He is. I
I
didn't
take
realize
back what
that
I
until I
said.
was looking right now at his IMDb, and I was like, oh, I guess he was in that one.
He's
Still haven't
also
checked that one out yet.
his favorite movie of mine will always be Mrs. Doubtfire as the prick um, boyfriend of Sally Field.
And I don't want to pass up Timothy Dalton yet. A shout out to he was really good in Doctor Who for a couple episodes. He played a bad guy on there for a bit.
Hey, don't forget Looney Tunes back in action. All right.
And I want to say he's on Doom Patrol right now
He
too.
is too. Yeah, Doom Patrol, Looney Tunes back in action. That's about it. Which is what.
He's got a couple of things here and there,
Yeah.
popping up.
Yeah. All right. So we've done
I
our
believe
both of our fours, which were both GoldenEye. You ready for your number 3?
my number 3. We just mentioned Martin Campbell, so let's bring him up one more time. The director of GoldenEye is going to come up once again to talk about Casino Royale.
All right.
uh,
That's a little higher on my list. I'll say that.
Interesting. I love this one. I'm not necessarily like Bond. Daniel Craig's Bond doesn't necessarily work for me all that well. I think that's an unpopular opinion, but like I think sometimes he takes himself a little bit
Well,
too
then you're
seriously.
not gonna like the rest of my list.
There's not enough like camp and it feels a bit more like the movie's taking itself slightly too seriously for what it is, but it's so like damn good that it like I can't like fault it for that. It's a great origin story, and I think it really like establishes Bond as young and early in his career, where he has sort of this. He's raw and he's angry. He's not like the calm and collected, always cool Bond that we come to know later. And I think we get Bond kind of broken down to his bare basics, and I think it does feel kind of like a ripoff of the Bourne movies in the way that the action is done, but like people don't really go back and cite the Bourne trilogy as like great movies now. People like them, but people still talk about Casino Royale as one of the great movies of that era and that time. So I think sure it ripped off its action, but when it does it in a way that's more impactful than the original thing, I think it gets some credit for that. And awesome opening, awesome closing, good way to kind of like bookend this revival of Bond that I think is going to be going on for a while now.
Yeah. I don't want to say too much because we'll get to it when I bring it up in my list. Because when I get to it, I want to talk about it. So I'll say
I figured it was on there for you.
really liked it. It's a really really good movie. Definitely of the Bonds that I will rewatch, it's one of the ones I will rewatch the most. So I will do my number 3. And speaking of the Daniel Craig Bonds, we will do his second Bond from 2008, Quantum of Solace.
Oh, jeez. Not high on my list, but you can go ahead and take the floor, Joe.
Well, I'm sorry your list isn't as good as mine. That's just how it is. Just a fun action movie. I really like the Bond girl. I like her story, and I like that she's just not there to be hot and be like an object of Bond's affection. Like a lot of the story really revolves around her and her, life, and she has agency, which is one of the things that makes me more interested in a Bond girl than just like, oh, she walks in front of Bond and he's like, I would like to fuck her, and that's basically her entire purpose in the movie. But yeah, you got Olga Kurylenko as Camille Montez. The only thing for me that I felt was really lacking was the villain, where I would have liked a more, I don't want to say campy villain, but just a more over-the-top villain, where it was just kind of this guy that was just like this shitty, person that was like a hardcore environmentalist to the point of an extreme. And also his name was Dominic Green, which I'm like, if you're going to make him an environmentalist with the last name Green, I feel like you kind of have to make him over the top, and they just made him like a guy. But yeah, couldn't really get the rights to Spectre, so it's like, oh, this villain organization is Quantum, and it ties in directly with the last movie of Vesper. The woman he loved, the Bond girl in the previous one, was wrapped up in this organization, and now he's like going into the organization that Green was a part of. And then you find out later that Quantum was just, or Solid, whatever it is, I don't remember, was part of Spectre. So yeah, just a fun action movie. I know a lot of people are lower on it than me, but I really liked it.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily work for me very well. I have it pretty low. I was scrolling down. I believe I have it down here at 17 on my list. I think
Boo, bad take.
Daniel Craig. Yeah, I mentioned that I just don't buy into. I just don't necessarily connect with like Daniel Craig's really really gritty take on Bond, where there's like zero tongue in cheek, and it's just like it's like I start to see like the folds in it a bit, and start to like feel okay. This is like kind of dumb that this is being taken so seriously, and I people harp on the editing of this as well. I think that definitely distracts
Well,
from it.
people are dumb, Tristan. People don't know shit. All right,
I
this
think
movie's good.
the action sequences in Bond are such an important part of it. Like people go and watch the movies purely for the action sequences. Some people do, and to deliver such chopped up like
Ooh, dance party.
barely like Johnny, our co-host, will say, "Oh, this car chase is like the best car chase ever shot," and it's like, okay, maybe, but I'm not seeing it, so I don't like believe you. Like you can tell me anything is good, but if it's cut up to the point where I'm barely comprehending what's happening, like it's not gonna,
Hey,
it's
sometimes
not
when
gonna
you're
work.
filming an action movie, it takes Liam Neeson 43 cuts to hop over a fence. Okay, just you do what you gotta do.
Like people will harp on that movie, will harp on like the Resident Evil movies that have all this bombastic, distracting editing, and I think this is like on that level for me. At least it's some of the scenes. It's not as bad as those movies are like throughout, but this has moments I like. I like the idea of the connective storyline throughout Daniel Craig's story, like having not necessarily going back to the beginning of all Bond, but being like, okay, our one version of Bond has like this continuous through line that connects his couple movies together. I like that. That's one of the things I liked about it. And I haven't seen this one since it came out in the theaters, so I rewatched some scenes on it recently to like recap my mind, and I watched some beginning of it, and I may go back and watch it again, but yeah, I started to rewatch it, and I was just thinking like, you know what, I don't think I need to rewatch this. It's not getting any better for me. But
Well, I don't know what to tell you. All right,
yeah, for me, it's pretty low. I know it's possibly an unpopular opinion to have it that low, but it didn't really work for me very well.
all right, all right. What's your number two?
Well, my number two uh, is a Craig movie that did work very well for me. Uh, Shockingly well. It was, I believe, the only Craig movie that I hadn't seen prior to this binge, and it is Sam Mendes' Skyfall from 2012.
All right. Fun fact: that is also my number two. So
Good choice. Good ranking there, Joe.
okay, so
I
you said
put
the
it.
Craig movies didn't work for you. I know what your number one is, but two of them are two and three.
Look,
So half of them are in your top three.
you're right. When you say it like that, it does kind of look bad. But I almost feel like the movies are better than Craig is. In a lot of the other Bond movies, like Sean Connery is better than the rest of the movie, and you're watching because like Sean Connery is really performing his heart out in some of the, and like I think Daniel Craig is like serviceable, and I think this is his peak for sure. He has two great ones, and then the two that are just like pretty low on the list for me. So he's kind of split for me. But yeah, this one is really high up there. I think the action works way better in this than the previous one, and I mentioned that For Russia with Love has that train fight towards the end, and this has its own big train fight, and the action, you can actually see what's happening in the action scenes. You can actually feel the flow of the action. You can feel the fear of Bond getting defeated by Batista because you can see what's happening. You can follow the flow of the the action like beat for beat, and you're not just confused of who's winning and who's losing it each second. And I think this is a great one with a great villain that is, you have the very obvious queer coding of some characters previous in the franchise, and at that point they're kind of made out to be jokes, and it's not like a particularly positive portrayal of gay people. And of course, making the one gay guy the villain of the movie is a bit of choice, but I think he works, and he's not giving like an over the top performance where you're like, oh, this is like a gay caricature. He has the coding there, and they have the little line of Craig there too. So I like that. I think it was fun to have that performance. It was a great action. Yeah, I think it's. I say I don't like Craig's portrayal as Bond, but I think he's in some good movies.
Yeah. I really like this movie a lot. It's definitely like a fun action movie. The opening fight on the train where he then has to ask Moneypenny to essentially like take a chance and like shoot him and the guy he's fighting, and then Craig, Moneypenny shoots Craig and he falls off the train into the water. One of the things I did like a lot about this movie is that M is essentially the Bond girl of this movie. Is she's the one that like the villain is after, that he has to rescue, and I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it in like a different direction. And but the one weird detractor is I just I'm blanking on the actor's name. Javier Bardem. Outside of No Country for Old Men, I just don't like him in movies. I've learned, for
Oh
whatever
wow.
reason, like him in this movie, I was just like, I'm like, I don't buy you as a former Double O agent, and that was kind of my big detractor, I guess. Where it's like Alec Trevelyan, I'm like, oh, I 100% buy you as like a former 006, but Silva, I'm like, there's no chance you were a former Double O like agent that worked for M. Like, I don't believe this. I don't buy this. But I was able to look past it, and I loved everything else about the movie. I love the Home Alone kind of aspect of him having to arm his house for when Silva and his guys come. The main theory I'm 100% bought into is that the role of Kincaid, the Scottish groundskeeper at the Bond household, was written for it to be Sean Connery, but I think Sean Connery was too advanced in his Alzheimer's or whatever he had at the time, that his like family and he were like forced to turn it down and not do it. But that would have been amazing if they had been able to, like, if they had brought in Sean Connery to play Kincaid and they were able to keep that a secret and not tell anyone and not like put it in the trailer, not say he's not, maybe he shows up to the premiere, but it's more like, hey, he's here for the 50th anniversary, and then that
Mm-hmm.
movie comes on and opening weekend Sean Connery shows up
Yeah,
and like kicks ass as this old Scottish groundskeeper in the movie that comes out on the 50th anniversary of Doctor No.
yeah, that would have been awesome. It would have been. I think it's a missed opportunity to not have more Bond connective tissue and have at least a couple crossover cameos here and there.
Yeah.
I don't want like, oh, here's Sean Connery's Bond hanging out with Pierce Brosnan's Bond and like a Doctor Who style thing. But I think it would be fun to have like Pierce Brosnan show up as a bartender or something in Daniel Craig's movie. You know, anything like that could be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I'd be down for that. All right, so that was our number two. So I guess that brings us to your one.
Yeah, I'll start with my one because it's one that got mentioned in the podcast previously. For me, we mentioned that I like a lot of these movies. I think a lot of them are even really good to great. You know, I think certainly some of my movies to rewatch. You know, perfect movies to sit back and drink to, or something like that. And this one for me though is a genuine 5 out of 5 movie. One that I think is like going to be in my favorites, and it's Goldfinger, the third outing of Bond, and I think the the perfect uh, balance of spycraft with humor, with fun, and genuine action and fun characters. I think Pussy Galore is a really fun character that could just be a punchline of her name, like, oh, let's make fun of the fact that that's her name. And she's more than that. She's very confident. She's able to stand up toe to toe to Bond, and she has her own abilities, her own strengths. You know, she has her whole entire flight school of women that she has trained to fly for her. And I like that the fact that we get a Bond girl who's a little bit more uh, powerful and assertive compared to the previous two. Who the first one was essentially like pure eye candy, and the second one's just kind of like a young doe for him to like fawn over a lot and for much of it love. And I think that you get some great characters in this. The villain, Goldfinger, of course, is very iconic. The big fat bald guy. You know, I think
I love
when I think
gold.
of
Yeah, gold member obviously based on him. So
yeah, when I think of Bond villains, even before I saw this franchise, like I would think of either him or Blofeld, the big Bond villain. But yeah, you have iconic scenes, iconic lines, and the actor in real life is like a genuine. human hero who rescued like a Jewish people during the Holocaust in Germany, and uh, he like conned his way into this role, and through that conning was able to do his part in performing one of the best villains of cinema history. I'd say.
Yep.
I love this one. I think it is a genuinely perfect movie. And of course, there's things that haven't aged well that you would change if you were making this in 2021. But I think for its time, it's like a 5 out of 5. That there's practically not a scene that I would change anything about.
Yeah. I just didn't watch it in its time. I watched it in 2021, so a lot of the moments that just don't hold up um, didn't make it. But obviously, it's still, as far as, I mean, it's low on my list of 10, but it's still, as far as the 24 Bond movies, it's still above the top half. So I did like it. I did enjoy it. It's just some of the other ones that kind of copied that formula, I feel like did it better, like I said earlier, and that's why it was lower on my list. But it's still a good movie. I did like the villain, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what your number one is going to be. Yeah, you mentioned that this is low on your, Goldfinger was low on your list, but you still liked it, and I wanted to mention like most of these are ones. There's only a few at the bottom that I would say I didn't like. I was surprised that I liked like pretty much all of these outside of a handful. So yeah, even if it's at like my number 11, number 12, that's like still a good one. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, same. So my number one is one we talked about earlier a little bit, and that was your number three, Casino Royale. I love the opening. I'll be honest. I haven't seen a single Jason Bourne movie. It's just one of the
Oh,
ones that slipped through the cracks for me for whatever reason. I never checked it out. Never got around to it. I was going to when they were going to release Jason. Well, when they were set to release Jason Bourne, the fourth one, and then everyone that saw it that was Jason Bourne fans says the movie sucks. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to waste my time. Which is kind of like what happened with Spectre. I was going to go back and watch all of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies before Spectre came out, but then everyone said Spectre sucks. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I like Casino Royale. I love the parkour chase scene in the beginning. The black and white opening was great. The Bond villain Vesper was great, and I just love the battle between him and the villain. Lashif was just a pure mental one of playing cards. I think maybe the card thing at the end could have played out better because it felt like it went really quick towards the end. But I liked that it was different and it wasn't so much like crappy punching each other like most of the other Bond movies. It was battle of brains, and it was more like, oh, I'm going to make you lose this game, so you lose other people's money and they come after you. I thought was a fun aspect, and then yeah, it was just really fun, great action movie.
yeah, and I think especially as like the premiere of this new era of Bond, and you could tell they weren't just bringing in a new actor. They were like, okay, let's kind of redo this thing. Let's
Mm,
start from the bottom and make it fresh, and
mm,
this feels like a ground up restart. They're not like one toe in the other thing, kind of, like I feel like most of the time when they're transitioning Bonds prior to this, it does feel like they're not quite out of one pool and into the other yet. There's a weird crossover tone where they're like, oh, is Timothy Dalton like a goofy Bond or is he like a serious Bond? I don't know. And Roger Moore has that towards the beginning of his run. I think his first couple of movies, sometimes they're struggling to figure out like, okay, what is this character's take on? Is it going to be more like this or more like that? And I think Daniel Craig from the launch, he figured out what he wanted the character to be, and he was able to stick with that and do it well. And it wasn't exactly my favorite version of the character, but I think he I'll give him props for not like getting confused of who the character was. He knew what he wanted to do from scene one, and they did it really really well.
yep. All right. So that wraps up our 10. So it's time to do our combined 10. And the first discussion I think we gotta have is what's higher, like what should be number one, a one and a three, or two twos?
Look, real quick, I'm gonna read through my top 10 to remind everyone what
Okay.
I had,
All
and then
right.
you can do the same thing, and I
Okay.
think we can go from there. So my number 10 is Moonraker. My number 9 is Doctor No. My number 8 is The Spy Who Loved Me. My number 7 was From Russia with Love. My number 6, where did I? My number 6,
License
I
to
think I
Kill.
deleted it. License to Kill. Yeah. My number 5 was A View to a Kill. My number 4 was Goldeneye. My number 3 was Casino Royale. My number 2 was Skyfall. and my number 1 was Goldfinger.
And my number 10 was Goldfinger. My 9 was You Only Live Twice. My 8 was License to Kill. My 7 was Living Daylights. My 6 was A View to a Kill. My 5 is Diamonds Are Forever. My 4 is GoldenEye. My 3 was Quantum of Solace. My 2 is Skyfall. And my number 1 is Casino Royale.
Yeah, it's a curious.
So what's higher, 2 2s or a 1 and a 3?
I think two twos makes it a nice balance, if you ask me.
All right, we can do that, and then Skyfall would then be number 1 and Casino Royale number 2.
I can take that. But then I think we put GoldenEye at 4 because we both had it at 4.
Do we put it at 4 or do we put it at 3?
Oh, you're right. We probably should put that at 3.
2.
So now we have Skyfall at 1, Casino Royale at 2, and GoldenEye at 3. Can I make a pitch for Goldfinger at 4? Because I have it at my number 1.
I think that's fair. I don't think you have to make much of a pitch for that. I think that's fair.
So now we're at Casino Royale
because
at 1.
it was also my 10, so...
That's true. It was on your list, so it gives me some credit there.
Yeah. So let me cross off everything. So we have Skyfall, Goldfinger, Casino Royale, GoldenEye. So your next highest is A View to a Kill at 5. I have it at 6. So I have Quantum at 3, but you don't have. However, you have A View to a Kill at 5, and that's your next highest. I also have it at 6. So I think we should do A View to a Kill at 5.
Let's do A View to a Kill at 5. We got our top 5 together, so then we can argue our way to the bottom somehow. You know, maybe get your Quantum of Solace in there somehow.
I think Quantum's the way you have licensed. Okay, now we gotta start having conversations. Should our 6 be License to Kill, which you have at 6 and I have at 8, or should it be Quantum that I just have at 3?
Yeah. I think.
I mean, I think it doesn't really matter because I think it's gonna be 6 and 7. I think.
Yeah, because I'll be happy to go A View to a Kill, and then Quantum.
So do Quantum at 6 and License to Kill at 7?
That hurts, but we can do it. I don't endorse that ranking, but you got my list to go for if you want to get my ranking.
7 is Quantum of Solace.
So now we got 3 spots left, Joe. And I have From Russia with Love, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Dr. No in those spots.
So Quantum of Solace, License to Kill crossed off. So your next highest is From Russia with Love at 7. My next highest is Diamonds Are Forever at 5.
Jesus.
I think that means Diamonds Are Forever has to be at 8.
You got Quantum of Solace, and you don't get 2 bad Bond movies in.
I don't care. A 5 beats a 7.
God.
That's how the world works.
Okay, hold on. What do I have that hasn't gotten in yet? I don't have anything, do I? I was trying to make a... All right, well...
So our next highest is... We're both at 7, and I just got mine on. So From Russia with Love gets in at 9. And then I would say Living Daylights gets in at 10.
I like that.
So both of our 7... So we both have 7 up, making the list, and then I also just have my 8 and my 10 because it was do-overs.
That works for me.
So From Russia with Love.
You got your 2 oddball choices on there. Classic Joe choices.
And 10 is The Living Daylights, and I will read off the list. And no, we didn't copy this show from anyone else. This is our own imaginations that came up with the format and concept of this show.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we invented ranking things. Like, we're the first people to ever be like, oh, let's just do like 10 of our things and then like rank them.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So at number 10, we have The Living Daylights. At number 9, From Russia with Love. At 8, Diamonds Are Forever. At 7, Quantum of Solace. At 6, License to Kill. At 5, A View to a Kill. At 4, Goldfinger. At 3, GoldenEye. At 2, Casino Royale. And our number 1 James Bond movie of all time, Skyfall. And
Skyfall.
that is our list. Yeah, the Adele classic song that they wrote a movie about, you know? That's just how that
Yeah, I didn't know
goes.
they made the movie about that one.
Alright, so that kind of wraps up the end of the show. Tristan, how do you feel about our list?
Yeah, no, it was stressful towards the end. You got a couple of those on there where I was like, oh boy, Joe got some low ones on there for me. But yeah, I think we came to some common ground. When we got to the top five, I was nervous because I was like, oh, we have a pretty diverse list here. We have a couple, one crossover maybe, but I don't know how this is going to go. But it helped that our top five was a
Pretty
lot
much
of
the
crossover
same,
movies.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I had a good one with this. I'm sure that Johnny and Bobby, the lifelong Bond fans of the show, would have a good time seeing where Vito kills on our list, right in the top five there.
Yeah, I just took a picture of our list and sent it in our group chat, so I can't wait to get their reactions on it. But yeah, I co-sign most of this list. I think some of these ones don't deserve to be on here, like From Russia with Love for the most part.
Like Diamonds Are Forever.
And Diamonds Are Forever is a great movie. Everyone should watch it. But yeah, I think that is the end of our show. We're going to continue Bond Week next week. Hopefully, we can get everyone to do a bracket. At this point, if we can get 3 of us on, I'm just going to be like, screw it. We're going to do the bracket and then hopefully do me versus Tristan in a Bond pitch-off with all 4 of us on. Fingers crossed. Bond month has been really fun. I've really been enjoying it.
You guys have seen Joe's takes on Bond movies, so I don't think I have a lot to deal with on this battle. I won't lie. I'm going in pretty confident. You know, after seeing this ranking, I think I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not gonna have Diamonds Are Forever on my ranking.
If you want to see boring garbage movies that no one cares about, watch the movies Tristan pitches. That's all I have to say. If you want fun, exciting, campy, over-the-top movies, watch the type of movies I pitch. And if you're curious why Tristan is wearing a Disney shirt, specifically Monsters Inc., and I'm over here wearing a Star Wars shirt, in a few minutes here, we're going to end this stream and start a new stream. So if you're watching us live on Twitch, join us here in maybe 10 minutes, and we will be doing a live watch-along of the first episode of Star Wars Visions. It's just a 15-minute animated short. If you're not sure what Star Wars Visions is, basically Disney allowed various anime studios to do their own take on Star Wars, so they could kind of do any story they wanted to. It didn't really have to connect with anything else or tie into the larger canon at all, just do their own thing. So we're going to watch the first one of that, do a live watch along. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, or you're listening to this in the podcast form, head over to YouTube or Twitch or anywhere, and you should be able to find our watch along. It should be already up, which is weird to say because we have yet to record it. I haven't watched it. Tristan hasn't watched it. Tristan, have you watched any of the Star Wars Visions episodes yet?
No, I have not watched them yet, but I know our reaction is great because it's already up. Guys, check it out. It's a great reaction.
I will say, right before we went on, I decided to check one out. I did watch Tatooine Rhapsody, which is the one I cared the least about going into because it was about a rock band. There was a lot in there that was really like that episode. The song at the end that was supposed to be this great song, singing wasn't the best, but the story of the episode was a lot better and a lot different than I expected. So I'm very intrigued to watch the first episode. The title is The Duel. And if you're watching on Twitch, we shall see you in a minute. And if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to us on podcast form, without further ado, good.